order to see the distinction between the virtualization and containerization, so if we are using containerization alone, we would install the runtime engine on top of the operating system, okay? And that runtime engine in itself has a small, like a very miniature version of another operating system that I mean, not the runtime engine. The container itself has a small operating system, like a miniature minimal operating system that it needs in order to execute the software, the application. Okay, so in order to run a container, you just need to run the runtime engine, and the container itself has everything it needs. Okay. Now, if you want to compare this to the virtualization, you would have your operating system, and then you install the virtual machine, and then the entire operating system on top of it. Okay, and then you run your application that is specific. So let's say this is the Mac, and then you need Windows, so you install a virtual machine, and then the entire Windows operating system would be installed of it, which is very heavy. And then there's no difference with between running the application directly here and there. The problem of missing dependencies is still there. Okay, now you can use them both, which is the case when we have Windows or a Mac machine that we want to run a container on, or at least for Docker. That you can have a virtual machine that has an operating system, but then you will have the container on top of that operating system, and I mean the runtime engine on top of that operating system, and then the container that has your application and everything depends on packaged. Okay. Now, when we talk about Docker, the most popular containerization system, it is built for Linux. It needs to work on Linux. So the versions that work on Mac and Windows need a Windows virtual machine. I mean, need a Linux virtual machine, which means that pretty much this model is what we are going to be working with. Unless you have a Linux. Does anybody here have a Linux? Everybody in your laptop? So Linux is an option, or? Okay, so Linux is the only thing that you have? Okay. All right, so you don't need to install virtual machine. When we get to work with the installation, you don't need to install the virtual machine. You just install the runtime engine right away. There are specific instructions on different systems. Okay, so if you have Windows or Mac, then a virtual machine is needed. If not, then it's not needed. But at the end, what we work with is exactly the same. All right. So that's the container itself. There is a difference between a container and a container image. Okay, so here's the process of creating a containerized application. Now, we typically would have two different environments, but we have some commands that allow us to go through these processes. So what we can see here, we talked about 4 different components, right? The container itself, container image, registry, and runtime engine. So where is the runtime image in this runtime engine in this image? It's the software that provides these commands. Okay, now let's go through the process. First of all, we are assuming we have 2 different environments here. So this would be the development environment, and this would be the deployment environment. So it could be production, testing. The term deployment means moving or reorganizing something from one place to another. Okay, that's the English word. And we use it often in software to represent moving software into a different environment. Okay, so this is the deployment environment, this is the development environment. So what happens in the development environment is that we have our software here with all its dependencies and applications. we run the build command in order to create an image. Okay, so that creates a container image. And then in order to make it accessible, we use the push command to put it in a container registry. Okay, now in the other environment, in the deployment environment, we need to get that image. So we need to execute the pull command to get the container image. And then in order to actually execute the application inside that image, we need to run use the run command. So when we use the run command, an instance of the container image would be created. So that's the actual container. Okay, so the actual container is an instance of the image. Now, every time we execute the run command on an image, a new instance will be created. Okay, so that's also nice in the sense that problems don't accumulate. So if something happened during one run, or something got corrupted or whatever, if you execute the run command, you have a fresh instance of the container, so the problems don't accumulate. All right. So this is the description of the process that I just mentioned. Now here, just because we're saying that in the development environment you create the image and then you push it, it doesn't mean that you cannot run it. You can still run it as long as you have the image locally. You can execute the run command. So I can try to run after building the image. I can try to run it in order to test it before I put it into the registry. All right. Yes. It can be public or it can be private. Yeah. So we will see. So you can make it public or private. Now, in fact, there are a lot of container images that are available in public. We can have a look at them.